So
yes, please.
if we will have to kind of continue. What would you say about this kind of phenomenon, right? The self, right, has been dismantled by the economical system, and each area of our activity has been subjugated to the system of production, and sexuality, as Foucault said, has been defined as unproductive, basically, and that's why this late 19th century unproductive. There's kind of waste of energy, right, as in this kind of bourgeois society. So that's why.
That's not true. That's not what Foucault would say.
That's what he was aiming. And as a result, we created this scientific approach to sexuality to kind of pin it down, understand, and incorporate in the system of production, that we can kind of have also usage of it.
No, that's more of the sort of the Frankfurt School way of thinking. It says that, you know, like sexuality is going to liberate us. You know, that if only sexuality was allowed to break free from its from the cage that limits it to economic production, then humanity will finally be free. That is more sort of the 1968, you know, hippie, counterculture, Frankfurt School way of thinking. Foucault has a much. Foucault is actually, that's what Foucault is directly critical about. That's what Foucault is assaulting. Foucault is saying that, like, this ideology that considers sexuality to be liberated, that sexuality is something that we should liberate, is actually the problem. Because it creates an obsession with sexuality that cannot be resolved. And then people are starting to judge each other by the way that they express their sexuality. So
what is his solution?
He doesn't have a solution. Foucault never does. That's always it's a very depressing thing to read Foucault, I find.
But I'm not saying that he perceives sexuality as a way of liberation, not at all. It's just as something that is unproductive, and the bourgeois society had to make a sense of it, and that's why reanalyze it and put it in this kind of scientific method system to kind of reincorporate it into the economical system and make peace with it, right?
Yeah, make peace with it, I think, is the best way of putting it. It's not. That's as he says. That's what in the 60s they called the liberation of sexuality. Foucault looks at that and looks at what people have talked about as the sexual revolution, and he says actually he does say that it is actually putting it. He doesn't really talk about economy, but he talks that, like, the more people express their sexuality, the more it is visible. And the more it is visible, the easier it is to manipulate.
Oh, what about, I'm quite sure that you went through the classical Orientalism side.
It was a while ago.
Yeah, but I think it's very relevant within your study, right? And probably you've heard this idea that Orient basically it started in India, and as a British colony, the India was pictured as basically as a woman, and all categories were ascribed to the fact that India is feminine. For example, that you don't talk to women. You know, you need to remember 19th century Britain, right? You don't talk to women. You don't understand her. She's emotional. She's kind of crazy. You just try to deal with it, but without getting inside. And that's how the Indian colony was pictured. And then later on, it spread it into the whole Orient. And that's why it's mysterious, it's sexual, it's sensual, but actually started through this colonial system. Yes. And what is your comment on it?
Absolutely. For instance, actually, this is what I was going to say. When I mentioned that the way that sexuality is expressed in the rest of the world, and especially in this case Asia, is perceived to be a threat to the political economy as well, is you got some very clear visual culture, actually. Hollywood being the cavalry during the Cold War era. For instance, there was this movie, Manchurian Candidate. Basically, the word to brainwash did not exist in English language until the Korean War. And what happened during the Korean War was that like they have suddenly discovered that there were all these American GIs who, compared to any other war before that, they were suffering from a massive loss of morale. So this one journalist, I think his name was Edward Hunter or something, I'm not exactly sure of his name, and he came up with the idea that like the Asians, the Chinese, had developed this sort of cognitive trick to brainwash people into agreeing into their own way of thinking. So basically it's unknown exactly what they were doing, but in Manchurian Candidate they sort of, it's like those typical scenes where you strap someone in front of a chair and you put a screen in front of them and it sort of bugs stuff at them and the images go fast and they're like, they all sort of mumble the same thing altogether. It's indoctrination essentially, and brainwashing. And basically, when I was reading Edward Hunter's idea about like what this brainwashing consisted of, he's talking about the American way of life and what he considers American way of life to be. American way of life, he says, is every man for himself. You do not stop to help somebody else. You do not, you don't sort of show altruism, because that's the pioneer spirit, right, of the Americans. I do what I think is right, and that they believe is what creates sort of American creativity. Because no matter what people tell you to do, you're going to do what you think is right, and that makes like Americans' perceptions of themselves extremely manly. That's what manly is. Well, okay, it works two ways. That's what defines what manly is, and manly is what defines that. So it's like an endless feedback loop that keeps feeding onto itself. And basically he's saying that they've been capturing these American GIs and they've been brainwashing them into thinking in an altruistic way. So, and what do we associate altruism with? Women. Because they sit at home all day and they cook for their men. So yes, there is that clear link between a certain kind of political economy, socialism, being feminine, associated with Asia, which is feminine, socialism, which is feminine because it, perpetrates altruistic values, and then you got another civilization model which is based on a political economy that says, go and be rich and do it by yourself. You don't owe anything to them. Taxes? No, who needs taxes? So yes, both the political economy and the ethnicity there are both tied into one big package with a ribbon on top that says men, women.
And there's a third one, I've read papers, Africa pictured as a kid, as a child.
That's very interesting, actually.
That child, you need to go and take care of it.
Yes, sexist as well.
Well, I mean, based on the same grounds, like you may as well see it as like the West as a dominantly masculine society looking down upon Eastern societies. So it's like, and picturing it as a female in its nature. So that's what the West would dominate with, So then, like the masculinity is also like the carrier of the rational thinking, of the logical thinking, of the reason. So it has all the arguments to rule.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And that's how it dismisses the idea that, of a collective economy, of an economy where people share things as opposed to just possessing for themselves. Yeah.
I will have a question, because as long as I understand, you trying to say that so-called like gay guys and over-feminine women, everything is just Westerners' projection on people here. I'll give you one example. There is a very famous singer in Taiwan, Luo Zhixiang, and the guy who is making an advertisement of necklace.
Of what?
Necklace. Women, the stuff women are using, right, when they have a period, necklace, right?
Is that called a necklace?
Oh, what is it called? I don't know.
Tampon.
Not tampons.
Pad.
Pads, the old pads, yes, anyway. For me, no, sure, it's seriously, I saw it. When I saw it for the first time, I was just, fucking shocked. I was like, for me, it's the most private, aspect of femininity, and there's a guy, and I asked my friends here, they were totally like cool with that. They said, yeah, cool, he's a cool guy, because he's doing that. So I'm trying to ask you. Huh?
What?
Luo Zhixiang is making advertisement, the women's pad, the guy, and he's not gay.
There's a doc. No, he's a singer.
He's a singer, Luo Zhixiang.
Can you tell me what happens inside this house?
No.
He is just bringing the stuff and need help and Lila.
Okay.
Your good friend came, right, and he's scaring, and you go to Watson's and you see the guy, smiling with his extra white teeth, and carrying the bag with the stuff inside. So what I want to ask you is do you really think that this is just a projection of the Western people, or the people here are really more feminine? Even the guys, they are more feminine, and why, for example, the Western women don't find them attractive because they think they are so gay, but at the same time, all the people here are like that. Most of the people are like that. Don't you think that this is what? No. Yes, that's right. So you're trying to think that this is my projection. I don't think so. Don't you think that this is what makes them sexually attractive to the women here? Because they look so good, so nice, such a little puppies, And it's not my projection. It's just this is a strategy, It's just a game, It's a strategy. Don't you think that this is not just a projection? That's the point where the society, common society, Taiwanese society, is at the moment, because another example, I used to live in China for a while, and they are more tough, but they look at Taiwan. They don't accept things from abroad, because abroad is bad. They don't accept things from Japan. We hate Japan. We hate Japanese because they kicked our asses, so we hate them. But we still like that stuff, and we just get everything to Taiwan. So they slowly started to accept these things, They also start to find very attractive, appealing to their some kind of ideas and some kind of I don't know what. So my question is do you think that it's just a projection that we just say we are bad Westerners? No, sorry, for a word, not bad, but we are just coming with the image of India as a woman. Then we have a image of Asia and rational Westerners who just coming and want to control. Don't you think that there's something really going on here, that the people are basically more feminine just because of, I don't know, because it's more attractive to the women
but
here?
Who decides the terms? Where is the borderline that says, okay, this guy is more feminine? It's you, through your Western glasses, you judge that this is feminine, and as the Taiwanese, maybe they.
But let's let F.A. address the question.
Different thing. This is just category, but.
Well, several things there. But to answer your question quite flatly, yes, I do think it's a projection. And well, first of all, it will be difficult to answer your question because your question is quite limited, right? Because the way it is, like you say, it is different here because I don't know. See, if you were to come up to me with a question and said it is different here because of X or Y or Z, then I could have come up and said okay. Then I would engage with that. But you're not telling me why it is different here. Just you don't offer an alternative explanation of why it is actually different. You see what I mean? If there was an alternative explanation about why it is actually different, it would have been a lot more substantial to engage with it. On the other hand, there is clear evidence that it is a projection. Because, for instance, when I compare it to visual culture, this kind of literature about how we have come to reflect about A, what being male or female is, B, what being Asian or Western is. So there's evidence to suggest that there is a social construction at work and there is an ideology at work which is reflected through the discourse of the Western expatriates who are living here. But in the absence of a better explanation as to why it might actually be different, then there is nothing to engage with there. But I mean, if there was an explanation as to, yes, they are actually different because of this, then I would be happy to consider it.
But my point is that this is something I hope that you are aware of the level of chauvinism, in the traditional Chinese culture, right? And stress which was put on the masculinity, in the past years, you know, even like 20 years ago, right? The people were totally different, and something happened. Something happened. I don't know what happened and why it happened. Something different, but it's changed. You know, if you watch, if you like, you consider this like a visual culture and so on, just simply watch some movie. So not even movies. It's just like a news, you know, from 80s. You know, when you see the people, how they dress, how they act, how they talk. There's just something totally different, and this is something like if you study a little bit traditional culture, when you see this strong sense of masculinity, and in the same, actually very similar sense when we have in the West, you know, of the masculinity, then I would say it's not a projection, because there was also a strong sense of masculinity when the guy had 4 wives, 8 concubines, you know, and he was the man, and he was really tough. There was no space for any being, you know, no room for being sweet. So this is not just my projection, but something happened, something changed,
Okay.
and feminization happened.
Okay, I can explain to you why this is a projection. Because you're selectively avoiding the evidence that suggests that there is actually chauvinism is still very much present. For instance, have you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Still very much present.
Yes, absolutely.
And for instance, has anyone ever heard this term shisanmei?
Yes.
Shisanmei basically is it means Western food lady, sister.
不是赞美，
西
赞美，
赞美，
不是赞美，赞美的赞，西赞美。
It's
Okay, you explain what it is.
it's everybody understands the
Yeah.
Okay. And basically it says that Western men are food, and these little sisters, they enjoy eating Western men, so that means they it's usually said of a very sort of caricaturized idea of a woman. And for instance, a lot of the people that I've spoken to speak much better Chinese than I do after I've heard this term shisanmei. Like, I'll be like, who's a shisanmei? They immediately would come up with, you know, the caricature, you know, the girl who wears a mini skirt at the club and she's, you know, stealing people's drinks, and she would fuck anything that moves, huh?
Very good English.
That doesn't usually come up, no. But, you know, that mini skirt comes up, fake eyelashes comes up, and being drunk comes up, and she would fuck anything that moves comes up. And see, this creation is not a Western creation. This is the creation of like Taiwanese male chauvinists.
Yeah.
There is actually a hip hop song called Shisanmei, and have you seen it?
Yeah.
And you know, it's like these guys with their blings and
Yes.
you know, singing about like how Shisanmei is like a traitor to the nation, and you know, how she should be put back in her place. No, that chauvinism is still very much there, and you might find that a lot of Chinese guys when they go, or Taiwanese guys when they go to, I don't know, places like the UK, they would find, you know, men are so feminine here. You know, I mean, take for instance a guy who's like a taxi driver who's chewing beats on that, and put it into London context, and he would look around and he would be like, all these guys are gay.
I don't think so would happen.
No, but you touched a good point, because it's, the feminization actually, as we might talk about this term, I kind of feel that it comes from, you know, our Western background, but it actually happens in the whole world in terms of, you know, we live in the big cities, and the urban culture just has different properties, and we change the way of behavior.
Yeah.
We don't need to be strong, masculine, and defend ourselves
My
from.
next point on it.
Yeah, we don't live in a jungle anymore, right? So we kind of need to calm down our aggressive
Aggression, you know.
aggression, yeah.
Reduce the aggression.
Exactly. So maybe this is the global tendency, and here maybe it's also reinforced by, as you say, projection. The projection is kind of bouncing off, and some patterns are distinguished here, and people kind of adjust to this picture that is imposed on them, and that's how it's even get bigger.
Well, you know, that universal thing about masculinity being sort of tamed. You can either say that, or you can say maybe it's just changed its nature. You know, maybe actually behaving in a way that, you know, a certain kind of reading perceives as being feminine, maybe it is aggressive in a different kind of way that, you know, you and I are maybe not as sensitive to as somebody who's actually familiar with how that works. So yes, I mean the fact of the matter is that reality is extremely complicated, and we need to create a sort of like a story about what reality is, and we need to sort of, you know, it's an evolutionary necessity almost to sort of, you know, try to make sense of the world, and so it is perfectly understandable. Well, although it's worth criticizing that people are going to look at things and they're going to classify them in one way or another, and that same classification might turn around and be applied to them in the case of the you know, the Taiwanese truck driver who finds himself in Paris or something.
I just want to share some of my experiences. I know you've done a lot of field work asking a lot of women different questions, but I've lived with a lot of women as roommates, and my last roommate, she was small and petite and blonde, and she thought that the Chinese guys were adorable. She went out with them a lot. And there was also another girl way back, but also she was small and petite. And I'm fairly small, but I have had roommates that are bigger, and they like Western guys more because they're bigger. And they think that the Asian guys are gay because they don't use the word gay. Mostly my male roommates would use that. But they would use too small for them. You know, they want a guy that's bigger than they are, so they don't feel that they're not, they want to feel small and petite, but they're bigger. So they want a guy that's bigger, whereas I don't care. Big, small, doesn't matter because, well, it doesn't matter because I'm...
It doesn't matter.
Good to know.
What I don't like about the Chinese man is I cycle to work. It takes me about an hour to get to work. One time I was late and I have to push my bike up the stairs, and on the way home I take this really long out of the way ramp back down, because the ramp goes this way and the stairs are on this side, and it's way out of the way, but it's fun to go down. But on the way to work I don't want to take that ramp, and it's also way out of the way. It'll take an extra 10 minutes to go that way. One time I was pushing my bike up the stairs, and there was these 3 Taiwanese guys wearing suits, and they were like maybe in their 30s, and the one guy, he just randomly, I'm just pushing my bike up, maybe I was in their way, I don't know, he just says all of a sudden, "Oh, you should go the other way around down that way would be better for you, this is too hard." I'm like, what do you mean too hard? I do this every day, I don't find it too hard. I was really mad, and I was late for work. So I said, "No, it's not better. I'll be late for work if I go that way." And then I just went up, and he was like, "Oh." And I don't like that. Like someone telling me just out of the blue, and I don't know who they are, just saying that to me. But on the other hand, there's this pharmacist whose family owns a pharmacy near my work, and the guy is Chinese, and he's really, really sweet, and he goes out of his way to help me and explain what all the medicines are, and I love him. He's so great. So I think it's a matter of, you know, I guess treatment.
Yes, of course. I mean, it's well, there is the aspect, of course, of individual experience. That's going to that basically determines your idea of how you view a culture. But yeah, patterns emerge. I mean, for instance, your friends considering that Taiwanese men are too small. You know, being big is something that's naturally associated with being male. So it's an obvious pattern there. I was talking to 2 Western girls, and I was traveling with them to the south, and they were saying that like the men in the south, they're much more masculine than the men up north. And I was like, so you know, it's my subject. So I was like, "Oh, why do you think that?" And they said that they have no fire in their eyes in Taipei. I was like, "Well, what do you mean fire in their eyes? How would you describe?" And basically the conversation ended up being them describing what constitutes a masculine skull shape. It's fairly frightening. And so yeah, of course, I mean the physical looks of people does absolutely come into what people consider to be masculine or feminine.
But did you do phenomenological study, or what kind of study?
No, I don't do phenomenological study. I basically do. That's why, I mean, I do ethnography, and then I compare it to the visual culture. And then I say these 2 things are both emerging in both the visual culture and people talk about Asians.
Oh yeah, there was a question I had about the Fu Manchu guy and the clinical setting. And he was in, the one guy was strapped down and he was in a clinic and the Fu Manchu guy was there. I kind of missed how that's a representation of artificial sexuality.
Well, because essentially what's happening there is in the previous scene you see sort of Fu Manchu getting a sort of sexual arousal of this guy being whipped by big masculine African slaves.
Okay.
And then you have him sort of strapped down on a stretcher in a clinic and he injects him with a concoction that is supposed to make him abide to his will.
Oh, okay. I had a women's studies teacher who was Chinese in Canada, and she was really, really angry as well that Asian men were depicted as Fu Manchu types in Hollywood. And she was bitter. She was about the bitterest. I was thinking, should I really be taking this women's studies class from this woman who's angry all the time? But she was really angry that Asian men were depicted as Fu Manchu, and she said they're not glorified and shown as handsome in America, because that's where she was living in Canada, but Hollywood wasn't showing her culture's men as handsome. Only the white men was was depicted as handsome.
Absolutely.
She was always really angry and pissed off about that.
Absolutely.
And so,
I mean, any could there's one actually consistent sort of study of Hollywood's depiction of I forgot the writer's name. Romance During the Yellow Peril, I think it's called. It is a book that studies like Hollywood's visual language from early 20th into early 21st century cinema, and in each one of them, like Asian men is sort of castrated, essentially.
But there's one way that actually the Asian men gain masculine position in the Hollywood cinema, right? It's Bruce Lee, right? And it's this kind of masculinity.
But Bruce Lee, I mean, I don't remember. Do you ever see Bruce Lee romancing with him?
You see him getting sweaty with a lot of guys.
Yeah. This study was in the context of sort of romantic encounters.
I know you said that you've been doing this research here, and most of the people you've been talking to are Western men and women, and specifically asking them about their views on Taiwanese or Asian sexuality. But maybe you could say something about Turkey. I mean, you did mention a couple things, but I mean, can you give perspective on like maybe how Asian people would view Turkish sexuality, or any other, like, give another comparison?
I am quite. I'd rather avoid wandering outside of my territory of expertise.
I have a question. I mean, I know this is kind of oversimplifying, but do you find the movies, like as you pointed out from the visual arts, you're exploring movies mainly, right?
Yes. Commercials as well.
Okay. Yeah, but like, okay. You mean
actually,
like
just a parenthesis. Is there a way of finding that commercial you mentioned on YouTube?
Sure, just find it out. I should go on YouTube. I saw it on TV, but
the name of the speaker probably.
Yeah, just go to Sean, just so I can look.
Could you dig it up and send it to Alex?
Yeah,
maybe?
sure.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
So do you find like movies mainly responsible for Asian girls being sexually appealing to Western guys, but Asian men not being attractive to Western women?
A movie?
Because it's kind of really, I mean, it's really kind of like on the opposite side, right? I mean, generally speaking, again, like the attitude or the opinion of Western men of Asian women, and the other way around, like Western women.
I'm not sure if I entirely understand your question. Are you asking?
So, like, I mean,
Is it because of movies? That
well, I personally do not believe that the movies could play such a major role, as in the past Asian faces were not actually that common in Western cinematography. So, but there is definitely certain stereotype. My question is, what's your opinion? What's the background to support the the concept of, or the Western men are attracted by Asian women so much. On the other hand, Western women being, you know, kind of having repulsive attitude towards terms of sexuality.
You mean beyond cinema?
Maybe it's feminism.
Generally speaking, like where do you find the you know, the root of this kind of?
It's difficult to get into an actual root of it. But for instance, okay, I can make the case for like making clear as to like how important movies actually are. And so when you said that movies are not actually that important because like there are not enough Asian faces in cinema, there you go. I mean, that in itself is an indication of how Asians are unrepresented, and when they are represented, they are misrepresented.
Yeah, but then why would you think just based on the movies, an Asian man would not be attractive for Western women?
Well,
kind of
no, I mean, okay, there is the academic aspect of it there that you also there's the academic practicality. I mean, it is like very, very difficult to conduct a study of what is the root of this stereotype. You know.
Yeah, but what's your opinion? You probably like went through thinking about
Okay,
this.
my opinion is that this is something that has been manufactured very systematically. And it involves, as I said before, the differences in the political economies between the two cultures. It involves a history of colonialism. And you know, like these political differences, political and economic differences, are what creates the visual culture. So I mean, it's not the visual culture. Okay, I mean, to a certain extent, then it again becomes a feedback loop. Then after a while, it's that visual culture that perpetuates the way that Westerners and Asians sexualize, and that perpetuates that political economic system, which then again perpetuates that visual culture. I mean, these things are not necessarily in that order, but these three things, the way we express it, through visual culture, and the political economy that sustains and thrives on it, that's, I suppose, the closest that comes into a root. It's a dynamic root, if you want.
I want to add to what she said. I studied a great deal of psychology and how it affects, how media affects our minds. And basically what we studied was the media basically controls what we find beautiful, and then they can use that in advertising. We studied it on many different layers, which I can't go into here. How the media decides what is beautiful and what's not beautiful, and how to behave and how not to behave, and then teaches it through movies, through advertising, through everything, how to be in our society. And I think that, you know, and when I came to Taiwan and I couldn't understand what any of the media was saying because it was in Chinese, I felt free. And I don't want to understand ever again what the media is saying, because I feel free, because I am not being influenced by it. If I look away and I can't understand the language, I am free, so I don't actually want to.
Yes, but see, in Europe, Asian faces are not common.
In Canada they are, and it's fine, but I mean in Canada they are, we're a politically correct country.
Yeah, but
So
like, for example,
well,
it's mostly like the Hollywood production that explodes this kind of funny Asian faces, right? But like in Europe, generally, you don't use Asian faces for commercials. European movies do not, generally speaking, like do not use the role of an Asian person.
They don't have the
So we don't really, in Europe, we don't really have that much of contact with Asia, but we still have some this kind of perception, right?
Which kind of perception? Like the Fu Manchu? You don't have
the perception of let's say Asian women being attractive, but Asian men not being so attractive. But might be, as you said, like the Western society builds certain picture of a man, right? And that man is not that common in Asia. So maybe that.
All right,
We're gonna need to move outside. So Efe, can you just wrap it up with 30 seconds?
Tell a joke.
I mean, maybe suggest if there's something people want to study this more. Where should we look for that?
Okay.
Or wait for your study to come out.
You mean resources?
Resources, maybe mention some resources. No, I mean just like if somebody wants to look do more study in this? Which direction should they go?
Well, I
Foucault
suppose
or-
I would read my thesis.
There you go.
Check out my blog. I suppose watching Mask of the Fu Manchu would be a very good start to begin with.
Okay.
You can post your blog